Welcome back to Reformed Thinking. This is the show where we dust off the old books, blow away the cobwebs, and see if the theology of the past can still handle the weight of the present.
It's a good way to put it.
Yeah, we're trying to step away from all the hot takes on social media and just sit down with the classics for a bit.
It's good to be back, and you're right about the weight. The books we look at, they aren't light reading, but they are heavy in the best sense of the word. They anchor you.
That's a good word for it. An anchor.
Yeah.
So what are we opening up today?
Today, we are opening up what many people consider to be the magnum opus of Charles Haddon Spurgeon. It's the Treasury of David.
Oh, the Treasury of David. I have a copy of that on my shelf. It is massive.
Yeah.
7 volumes, I think.
Mm.
It looks like it could hold up a house foundation.
It practically could. Spurgeon spent, I think, 20 years working on it.
20 years.
Yeah. It's a commentary on the Psalms, but it's not just him writing. He went through centuries of church history, Puritans, reformers, even medieval monks, and he pulled out their best thoughts on every single verse.
So it's more like a collection.
It's a collection of the best thinking on the Psalter that was available up to the 19th century. A real treasure.
And today we're zeroing in on just one psalm, Psalm 86.
That's the one.
Okay, so just to set the scene for you listening, this psalm has a specific title in the Hebrew. It's called a tefillah.
Which translates simply to a prayer.
That seems a little redundant, doesn't it? I mean, aren't all the psalms prayers? Or at least, songs that function as prayers?
You'd think so. I thought so for years. But Spurgeon points out a detail that I completely missed. Out of all 150 psalms, only 5 actually carried this specific title, a prayer, in their inscription.
Only 5. Which ones?
Psalm 17, 90, 102, 142, and this one, 86.
Huh. So this one is special. It really earns that title.
It does. While you find praise in it, the dominant DNA of this psalm is petition. It's all about asking, pleading. Spurgeon calls it a family likeness.
A family likeness. What does he mean by that?
He says if you look at the face of this psalm, and then you look at the prayers of believers throughout history, whether it's a first century martyr or a 21st century mom, they all look like this.
They share the same features.
Exactly. They belong to the same genus, as he puts it.
That's a comforting thought. We're not, inventing the wheel every time we pray. We're stepping into a stream that's been flowing for thousands of years.
We are. And speaking of that stream, and specifically our Reformed heritage, Spurgeon opens with a really fascinating observation about the text itself. It has to do with the name of God.
Oh, I saw this in the notes. The scribes were playing fast and loose with the text. Is that right?
In a way, yeah. The name of God, Jehovah, or Yahweh, it appears a lot in this psalm. But the Jewish scribes, when they were copying the manuscripts, they often swapped out the name Jehovah for Adonai.
Adonai, which means Lord or Master.
Correct.
And that was out of fear.
Right.
A superstition. They were afraid of misusing the sacred name.
That's the traditional explanation, a superstitious dread. But Spurgeon points out the irony here, and it's a very sharp critique.
What's the irony?
He notes that these scribes were so afraid of their God that they dared not write his name, yet they had so little godly fear that they dared to alter his word.
Oof, that hits hard. So they were more afraid of a ritual taboo than they were of editing the inspired text.
It shows a real misalignment of priorities. They let their superstition overrule the integrity of Scripture.
But Spurgeon contrasts that with the Christian position.
He does, and specifically the Protestant confidence we have. We don't labor under that kind of tormenting dread.
We don't have to be afraid to say the name.
No. We rejoice in it. We have a Father. We have the spirit of adoption. So when we come to Psalm 86, we don't need to swap out words. We can read it exactly as God gave it, with the confidence of children rather than the terror of slaves.
Okay, so let's get into the text itself then. Section 1, that's verses 1 and 2, it starts with a very physical request. Bow down thine ear, O Lord, hear me.
Bow down, just, pause on that image.
It implies a height difference.
A massive one. You have the infinite Jehovah, the one who spans the heavens, and David is asking him to bend low, to lean in.
Spurgeon talks about God's condescension here.
He does. He says God bows to listen to prayers that are, to use Spurgeon's own phrase, without wing.
Without wing. That's a great phrase. I assume he means prayers that can't even get off the ground.
That's exactly it. Sometimes we're so crushed by despondency or so aware of our own smallness that our prayers feel like they just fall out of our mouths and hit the dirt.
They have no lift.
No lift at all. They can't fly up to the throne of God on their own.
So if the prayer can't go up to God,
God must come down to the prayer. He bows his ear. It's an act of accommodation to our weakness. It's beautiful.
But why should he? David gives a reason in the very next breath. He says, "For I am poor and needy."
And this is what Spurgeon calls the master argument.
The master argument.
And if you think about it, it is the complete opposite of how the world operates.
Completely. I mean, if I go to a bank for a loan, I don't walk in and say, "Give me $1 million because I have absolutely no money and no way to pay you back."
You'd be laughed out of the building. In the world, you list your assets, you prove your merit, you show your potential.
Right. Here's my portfolio, here's my credit score.
But in the kingdom of God, the logic is inverted. Misery, Spurgeon says, is the master argument with mercy.
So the admission of emptiness is the very thing that fills the hand.
It's the only thing that fills the hand. This isn't a plea of merit. It is a plea of total dependence. A proud man would never, ever use this argument.
No.
Spurgeon notes that the great ones of the earth would mock this. They would find it humiliating to admit they are poor and needy.
It brings to mind the Pharisee and the tax collector in the temple. The Pharisee stood there just, reading his resume to God. "I fast twice a week, I give tithes."
And he went home empty. He had no room for grace because he was so full of himself.
But Spurgeon adds a warning here that I think we really need to hear.
The worst kind of sinner.
Yeah, he says the worst type of sinner is the one who uses the language of spiritual poverty. Maybe reciting a confession in church. But secretly, in his heart, he thinks he's rich and increased in goods.
That's the danger of liturgy, isn't it? We can say the words, "I am a miserable offender," with our lips.
While thinking, but honestly, I'm doing better than the guy in the next pew.
That is the trap. The confession has to be genuine. We really are poor. We really are needy. But then, right after this confession of total bankruptcy, David throws us a curveball in verse 2.
He does. He says, "Preserve my soul, for I am holy."
Whoa.
Wait a minute. We just established we're poor and needy. We're Reformed Christians. We believe in the total depravity of man. How can David, a man who definitely had some major moral failures, look God in the eye and say, "I am holy"? Is this arrogance?
It certainly sounds like it on the surface. It can be a real stumbling block. But we have to dig into the word that David uses here. The Hebrew is hasid.
Hasid.
And it doesn't mean sinless perfection. That's not the idea at all.
So he isn't claiming he never makes mistakes.
Not for a second. The word implies being set apart.
Okay, set apart.
Think of the vessels in the temple, the bowls and the lampstands. They were called holy, not because they had moral virtue, but because they were dedicated exclusively to God's use.
Right, you couldn't take a temple bowl and use it to serve beer at a party.
It would be sacrilege.
Exactly.
So when David says, "I am holy," he is essentially saying, "Lord, I am your property. I have been set apart for you. Do not let your enemies defile what belongs to you."
Oh, so it's actually an argument based on God's ownership, not David's performance.
That's it. He's pleading for property protection. I am yours, so take care of me.
That makes so much more sense. But you said there are other nuances too.
There are. Spurgeon notes it can also mean innocent regarding a specific charge.
How so?
Well, if someone accuses me of theft and I didn't do it, I can plead my innocence in that specific case without claiming to be a perfect human being in general.
Got it. And what was the other one? Spurgeon also mentions it can translate to merciful or tender heart.
Yes. It can be a plea that God should deal mercifully with him, just as he has tried to be a man of mercy toward others. But the main point, the thing to really hold on to, is that this isn't self-righteousness.
Right.
Spurgeon says the saint knows where he is clear, and he knows where he must cry peccavi, which is Latin for "I have sinned."
He knows the difference between his integrity in one area and his depravity overall.
And look at the safety net he puts in the second half of the verse. This is so important. He doesn't just stop at "I am holy." He immediately pivots to "Save thy servant that trusteth in thee."
That's the anchor. That's the real foundation of the plea.
It is. The holiness isn't the ground of salvation, the trust is. Spurgeon uses a very vivid, almost brutal analogy here to contrast God with human masters.
Oh yeah, he brings up the Amalekitish master from 1 Samuel.
That's the one.
The story where David finds the Egyptian servant half dead in a field.
Exactly. The master had a servant who got sick. And because the servant was sick and couldn't work, what did the master do? He just left him in the field to die.
He was disposable.
Completely. Spurgeon says the world is an Amalekite master. It uses you until you're broken, and then it tosses you aside.
But God is not like that.
No. He preserves his soul. He saves the servant who trusts in him, even when that servant is poor, needy, or sick.
That leads us right into section 2, verses 3 through 5. The intensity seems to ramp up here. David says, "I cry unto thee daily."
This introduces the concept of importunity.
Importunity. Now, that is a word we don't hear very often outside of theological circles.
It just means persistence.
Yeah.
Annoying persistence, almost. It's a refusal to stop asking.
Like the widow and the unjust judge.
Precisely. The question is, can we use our persistence as a logical argument with God? Can we say, God, answer me because I keep asking?
And Spurgeon's answer is yes.
He argues yes, and his logic is very comforting. He says, if we have looked to the Lord alone in all former times, if we have been crying out consistently day after day, we can be sure he won't desert us now.
It proves the relationship is real.
It does. We aren't just treating God like a vending machine we kick when we're hungry. We're in a daily conversation. It legitimizes the request.
Spurgeon traces a progression here.
He does. Look at the steps David has taken so far. First, I am poor and needy.
Okay.
Second, I am set apart. I am yours. Third, I trust. Fourth, I cry daily. He's building a case, brick by brick.
And then in verse 4, he uses this beautiful image. Rejoice the soul of thy servant, for unto thee do I lift up my soul.
Lift up my soul. Spurgeon gets very practical here about what he calls the mechanics of faith, if we can put it that way. He admits that this is hard work. It is really difficult to lift a soul out of the miry clay of despondency.
Oh, absolutely. When you're depressed or anxious, gravity just feels heavier. Lifting your heart to God feels like trying to lift a car.
It does, and Spurgeon uses two analogies here that I think are just lovely. The first is the heliotrope.
The heliotrope, that's a flower, right?
Yes. The name literally means sun turner. It's a plant that naturally pivots its face toward the sun throughout the day.
It follows the light.
Right. Spurgeon says, as the heliotrope looks to the sun, so turn I my heart to thee. It implies a natural instinct of the new nature. Even when we're heavy with rain, we still turn toward the light.
And what was the second analogy?
The brazen serpent from the wilderness. The Israelites, they didn't have to climb a mountain or fight a battle to be healed of the snake bites. All they had to do was look.
It was the gaze that saved them.
It was. Spurgeon says we lift our soul's eye to God to live. And here's the comfort for anyone listening who feels weak today. God accepts the will for the deed.
What does that mean exactly, the will for the deed?
It means that while we are straining, laboring to lift our heavy souls up to him, he sees the effort, he sees the desire, and he draws the servant near while the servant is struggling to draw near. He meets us in the lifting.
Wow. That takes so much pressure off. We don't have to have the strength to reach heaven. We just have to have the desire to look there.
And the reason we can look with confidence is found in verse 5. For thou, Lord, art good and ready to forgive.
Ready to forgive. That is a striking phrase.
It's the theological bedrock of this whole section. Spurgeon contrasts God with men. Men, we might forgive eventually, but we are rarely ready to do it.
No, usually we need a cooling off period. We need an apology. We might even need to see the other person squirm a little bit first.
We need to be persuaded. But Spurgeon uses a legal analogy here. He says God has the pardon ready drawn.
Ready drawn.
Yeah. Imagine a lawyer's desk. The pardon is already typed up. The terms are settled. The seal is affixed. It's just sitting there waiting for the name and the date. God doesn't need to be pressured into mercy. His heart is already there.
He also uses the image of the cornucopia.
He does. Plenteous in mercy. God doesn't dispense grace from a slender store. He isn't rationing it out like water in a drought.
It's a horn of plenty.
It pours. Spurgeon connects this right back to Exodus 34, where God reveals his name to Moses in the cleft of the rock. David is standing on that same theological ground, claiming that the Lord is abundant in goodness and truth.
So we've established the plea and the character of God. Now in section 3, verses 6 through 10, David shifts gears. He moves into what I call the logic of prayer and true religion.
Right. Verse 6 says, attend to the voice of my supplications. Spurgeon makes a very interesting distinction here between noise and voice.
Okay, what's the difference?
Noise can be just panic, it can be babbling, confusion, but a voice implies meaning. It implies a distinct living sense.
It has a message.
It has a message. Spurgeon says that even when our prayers are confused, when they're mixed with all the static of our anxiety, God sits through that noise to hear the voice, the kernel of intent at the center.
He decodes the signal.
He does. And because he hears, prayer is practical. Verse 7, in the day of my trouble I will call, for thou wilt answer me. This is what Spurgeon calls the pragmatic argument for faith.
Which is pretty simple. We pray because it works.
That's it. Spurgeon is arguing against deism here, the idea that God, created the world and then just walked away. He says, who would make a conscience of pleading with the winds?
Right. No one talks to a brick wall for long.
Exactly. If God didn't answer, if prayer had no effect, human beings would have stopped doing it thousands of years ago. We continue to pray because we have data, we have a history of answers.
And this leads David to declare the uniqueness of God. Verse 8, "Among the gods there is none like unto thee."
In David's context, this was a bold political statement. The world was full of gods. You had idols, statues, you had kings who claimed to be divine.
A crowded marketplace of deities.
A very crowded market. Spurgeon just dismisses them all. He says gods of delegated office like magistrates or kings, they are nothing before Jehovah. And the gods of superstition are vanity itself.
It really comes down to the works, doesn't it? What they can do.
It does. Spurgeon asks the rhetorical question. When have any of these false gods ever divided a sea? When have they fed a multitude from the skies? The works of Jehovah set him apart. He's the only one who actually does anything.
Now, verse 9 takes this uniqueness and expands it into a global vision. All nations whom thou hast made shall come and worship. It sounds prophetic.
It's a missional vision. And this is where we see Spurgeon's deep-seated optimism. You know, there's a common view, it was common in his day, and it's certainly common now, that the world is just going to get worse and worse.
The whole handbasket to hell theory.
That's the one. The idea that everything will end in total darkness and failure before the end comes. Spurgeon really critiques that notion. He says it damps missionary zeal. If you believe the ship is guaranteed to sink, you don't work very hard to scrub the decks.
That's a good point. But Spurgeon believed the nations would come.
He did. He believed the text. David says, all nations shall come. Not might come, not could come, shall come. Spurgeon says, the truth will one day be carried unanimously. He expected the dwellers in all lands to learn righteousness.
That is a refreshing perspective. It frames our mission work not as a desperate holding action, but as participating in an inevitable victory.
Precisely. And this leads directly to verse 10. Thou art great, thou art God alone. This brings us to the Reformed stance on exclusivity.
God alone. That doesn't leave much room for a committee of deities.
No. Spurgeon says true religion makes no compromises. It does not admit Baal or Dagon into the tent.
Right.
Today, we live in a culture that values what it calls philosophic breadth. The idea that, all roads lead to the top of the same mountain.
Pluralism.
Right. Spurgeon says that when you build a pantheon, which is a temple for all gods, it eventually becomes a pandemonium.
A pandemonium. Chaos.
Exactly. He uses a phrase here I really like. He calls it benevolent intolerance.
That sounds like a contradiction. How can you be benevolent and intolerant?
It sounds like it, but think about it. Benevolent means we love people. We want their good. Intolerance means we refuse to validate lies that will hurt them.
So it's like a doctor being intolerant of cancer.
Perfect analogy. We undeceive mankind regarding the value of their compromises. We tell them the truth because we love them.
And the reason we can be exclusive, and the reason it's safe, is because God blends greatness and goodness.
That is the philosophical key. Greatness without goodness leads to tyranny. Think of a powerful dictator who is evil. That is terrifying.
And goodness without greatness.
That leads to weakness. A kind of person who has no power to help you is useless in a crisis. But God blends both perfectly. He is infinite in power and infinite in goodness. He is the only safe place to put your trust.
Which brings us to section 4. If God is this unique, this great, and this good, how should we respond? Verse 11 gives us the request, teach me thy way, unite my heart to fear thy name.
Teach me. Just notice the posture. The world, Spurgeon says, is ignorant of its ignorance. People think they know everything.
So true.
But the believer wants to live in God's school. He knows he's a student.
And the method of learning is walking. I will walk in thy truth.
Right. Truth isn't just a sentiment you feel while listening to a deep dive like this. It's a matter of daily life. It's practical.
Spurgeon uses a great analogy about a carpenter here.
He does. He asks, what is the use of a carpenter's rule if he just sticks it behind his back and never actually uses it to measure anything?
It's just an accessory, a prop.
Exactly. The Bible is a ruler. It's meant to be used to measure and square our lives. If we just carry it around but don't walk by it, it's useless.
But doing that, actually walking in the truth, requires focus. And that brings us to what I think is the core concept of this entire psalm. Unite my heart.
This is the prayer we all need. The problem David faces and the problem we face is what the Bible calls the heart and a heart, double-mindedness.
Being split right down the middle.
Yes. Spurgeon uses a hydraulic analogy here. Imagine a stream. If that stream trickles out into 100 little runnels and pools, it loses all its force. It just creates a marsh.
It just becomes stagnant.
Right. But if you channel all that water into one deep bed, it drives forward. It has force. It has power.
It can turn a wheel. It can generate electricity.
Precisely. Spurgeon says the man of divided heart is weak. He wastes his force on a dozen different trivialities. But the man of one object is powerful.
So the prayer, unite my heart, is a prayer for integration, for wholeness.
It's a prayer for focus. God, gather the scattered strings of my nature and tie them into one knot. And notice, it is God who has to do it. We can't unite our own hearts.
Spurgeon contrasts this with hypocrisy, doesn't he?
He does. The hypocrite has one soul for God, usually on Sunday morning for an hour, and another soul for the world during the week. That is a divided existence. Sincerity, on the other hand, drives one design. It's whole.
There's a quaint saying Spurgeon quotes here from a poet named Francis Quarles.
Yes, I love that part. The line is, I haved it not when I did die.
I haved it not when I did die.
Quarles is speaking in the voice of Christ, and he's saying, I didn't give you half a life or half a death on the cross. I gave everything, so why do you give me half a heart?
That is a piercing question. God wants the whole heart or none.
It is the ultimatum of grace. And when the heart is united, we see the result in section 5, verse 12. I will praise thee with all my heart.
So the united heart leads directly to wholehearted praise.
You cannot praise with a divided heart. It's impossible. When the heart is one, the praise is whole. Spurgeon calls praise the quit rent we pay to God.
Quit rent. That's an old feudal term, isn't it?
It is. A tenant would pay a quit rent to the lord of the manor to be free or quit of other services.
Okay.
Spurgeon says that as God renews the lease of mercy for us every single morning, we owe him the rent of praise. It's our constant acknowledgement that we live on his land by his grace.
And the depth of that praise comes from the depth of the rescue. Verse 13, delivered my soul from the lowest hell.
The lowest hell. Now, David is likely using a metaphor here.
Right, he's probably not talking about the eternal destination literally in this context.
Probably not. He means extreme danger, misery, the deep dishonor he felt from his enemies. He felt like he was in the pit.
But there is a theological meaning there, too.
There is. This touches on prevenient grace, the grace that goes before. And Spurgeon gets very personal here.
What does he say?
He confesses that without God's grace, his own natural vehemence, his fiery personality, would have driven him into the lowest abyss of sin.
He knew his own capability for darkness.
He did, and he quotes Augustine, who had a brilliant insight on this very thing. Augustine said, the debtor whose debt is paid is delivered from torture, even if he wasn't yet tortured.
Say that again. That's a deep thought.
The debtor whose debt is paid is delivered from the torture he would have faced, even if he never actually set foot in the torture chamber.
So we are saved not just from the sins we committed, but from the sins we would have committed if God hadn't stopped us.
Exactly. We are saved from our potential futures, and that is a reason for massive, massive gratitude.
It really changes how you look at your own life history. You start to realize how many bullets you dodged without even seeing the gun.
For sure.
Now, in section 6, the scene shifts again. The enemies return. Verse 14. The proud are risen against me.
It's inevitable. If you are holy, if you are set apart for God, the proud will rise against you. Spurgeon says the believer's walk with God is like smoke to their eyes. It just irritates them.
And he has a very interesting, very pointed definition of an atheist here.
He does. He defines the ungodly as those who have not set thee before them. And he makes the point that irreligion is akin to inhumanity. He says, and this is a strong statement, an atheist is a misanthrope.
A hater of mankind. That is a strong charge.
His logic is that the fatherhood of God is the only real basis for the brotherhood of man. If you remove the creator, you eventually remove the inherent dignity of the creature. If you don't respect God, eventually you will lose respect for people.
But David turns away from these proud men. Verse 15 starts with that great turn. But thou, O Lord.
The contrast, it's everything. We turn from the blusterings of proud men to what Spurgeon calls the sea of glass of God's nature. And he breaks down this nature into what he calls a chromatic scale of love.
A chromatic scale, like a musical scale, or light.
Like light. He says love is the white light, but it refracts into different colors depending on our specific need.
Okay, break that down.
If we are sorrowful, love becomes compassion. If we are tempted, love becomes grace.
Right.
If we are erring, Love becomes patience or long-suffering. If we are sinning, it becomes mercy. And if we are resting on a promise, love becomes truth.
That is magnificent. So God's love isn't static. It adapts its hue to match our specific condition.
It meets us exactly where we are. And responding to that love, David claims his identity in verse 16. Save the son of thine handmaid.
And this is a very specific cultural reference. Son of thine handmaid. It sounds a little strange to our ears.
It does. It refers to a home-born servant. In that culture, you could go out and buy a slave at the market. But a servant born in your house to a mother who was already your servant had a different status.
They were part of the family structure in a way.
They were. They weren't a recent purchase. They had grown up in the household. They belonged to the master by birthright.
So David is saying, Lord, I'm not a stranger. I was born in your house. I am your property entirely.
Exactly. And Spurgeon notes that some might find that a degrading illustration, calling yourself a slave who was born of a slave.
But David doesn't see it that way.
He uses it with delight. To be God's property is the highest honor. He is claiming a family right to protection. You take care of your own, Lord, and I am your own.
Which brings us to the final section. Section 7 and the final request in verse 17. Show me a token for good.
A token, a sign, a proof.
Is David asking for a miracle here? You know, a lightning bolt, a wet fleece on dry ground.
Not necessarily. Spurgeon interprets this to mean that the deliverance itself is the token, but he also cites Bellarmine, a counter-Reformation theologian, which just shows Spurgeon's willingness to find truth anywhere, who has a great insight here.
And what does Bellarmine say?
He says the token is spiritual joy and tranquility in the face of trouble.
So the miracle isn't that the trouble stops, but that you are calm in the middle of it.
Precisely. That is the sign that confuses the enemy. When the proud men are blustering and attacking, and the son of the handmaid is sitting there with a united heart, full of peace, that is the token.
The text says the enemies see it and are ashamed. They're disappointed because their attacks didn't destroy your peace.
It brings God double honor. He helps us. That makes us safe. And he comforts us. That makes us joyful. Spurgeon says God does nothing by halves. He doesn't just rescue the body and leave the soul trembling. He hopens and comforts.
Hopen. There's a great word we need to bring back into circulation.
Indeed. It implies a robust, sustaining help. It's more than just a little assistance.
So we have walked the full path of this psalm. From the plea of poverty in verse 1 to the logic of importunity, the absolute need for a united heart, all the way to this token of peace.
It's a complete map of the soul in prayer. Every stage is there.
As we wrap up this deep dive into Psalm 86 and Spurgeon's Treasury of David, what's the big takeaway for you? How does this connect to our reformed thinking?
I think it illustrates the perfect balance of human dependence and divine sovereignty. You see, David is active. He's crying. He's lifting his soul. He's walking in truth. He's not passive.
Right. He's totally engaged.
But the motive power, the ground of his hope, is entirely God. God is the one who bows down. God is the one who is ready to forgive. God is the one who must unite the heart.
So it's not let go and let God, but it's also not pull yourself up by your bootstraps.
No, it's not. It's the active dependence of a child on a good father. And I think that prayer in verse 11, unite my heart, is the essential prayer for the sanctified lives.
The essential prayer.
I really believe that. If we get that right, if we can get our hearts focused on one object, which is the fear of his name, then everything else starts to fall into place. The praise becomes whole. The trust becomes deep. The peace becomes visible.
It really challenges us to look at our own fragmented lives. We are so distracted by a million things, notifications, worries, ambitions. And here's this ancient prayer. Pull me together, Lord. Make me one.
And fear thy name. That's the binding agent. That's what pulls it all together.
I want to leave our listeners with a final thought to chew on, something that comes out of that final section on the token for good.
Go ahead.
We often look for God to show up in spectacular, cinematic ways. We want the seed apart. We want the check to magically arrive in the mail. And God can do those things, of course. But Spurgeon and David seem to be saying that the greatest token of God's presence might simply be your own composure.
Yes. Your peace.
So I'd ask you to think about this. Is your current reaction to your own difficulties a token that confuses your enemies? Does your peace prove your God is real? Or are you looking for lightning while you're missing the miracle of peace right there inside you?
That is a searching question. If we have the united heart, we will have the token.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into Reformed thinking. We hope this exploration of Psalm 86 has sharpened your mind and warmed your heart.
Until next time, keep reading and keep thinking.